Still, he's on an elite offense with an MVP quarterback who effortlessly I can't say that word. Whew. Has this been a wild start to the season or what? Seriously, there might be 25 teams out there that we don't know whether they're good or not, whether they're frauds, whether they're for real, who knows? But we do know good players, right? We do know good spots, and we do know that volume is everything in fantasy football. That's what I'm here to talk about today. Must-start players for week 4. We'll throw a couple of sits in there as well, but must-start players. Again, I tell you guys this every week. You're not going to hear Derrick Henry's name. If you're watching videos where they're telling you to start Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara and Devontae Adams, you're in the wrong place. You should be right here, because my objective isn't just to tell you who's a good play from week to week and who's a bad play, but to help you really navigate these murky waters in the fantasy world to see and really be able to distinguish yourself what makes a good play. You watch a video or you read an article where it's 2 sentences saying good matchup, ranked 32nd in pass defense, with no context whatsoever, not talking about the teams they've faced or the players that are injured, none of that stuff. I want to cover all of that and make sure that when I'm giving you guys this information, that it is well researched and it's going to put you in a good spot. Now, with that said, I'm going to take some risks sometimes, and risks on good plays that make a lot of sense. But it's no fun giving you players that are already elite, that are already having good seasons. You know to start them. And if you don't know to start them, you're helpless. Let's dive into it. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Appreciate all of your support. We only started this channel a little while ago, and we've really done well thanks to all of you checking us out each and every day. And hey, follow me on Twitter at Laffy_D. Let's go. Odell Beckham returned to action last week for the first time since week 7 of 2020, and it's fair to say he didn't have to shake the rust off. Beckham finished with 5 receptions for 77 yards on 9 targets and also gained 10 yards on a rushing attempt. But he looked like his old self and even made an insanely difficult grab, but was unfortunately out of bounds. And all of the incompletions were either errant throws by Baker Mayfield or just good coverage. But Beckham was Mayfield's clear top option straight out of the gate and saw a 31% target share on the day. Actually, no other receiver or tight end was targeted more than 3 times, while Beckham saw 3 targets of 20-plus yards downfield alone. He played 64% of the snaps and ran a route on 83% of dropbacks, so there's absolutely no reason to assume he won't be at full capacity heading into week 4, even though he apparently dislocated his shoulder and popped it back in, but shrugged it off as football stuff after the game. And the craziest part? Beckham said after the game that he never felt like he could get his legs underneath him, and he was so exhausted after the game that he lost his voice without even screaming. Shit, he could have fooled me. If that's Beckham at less than 100%, I can't wait to see what he looks like against the Vikings, who are allowing a heinous 10.1 yards per attempt and 76% completion rating to opposing passers. This game has legit shootout potential, and the Browns have one of the higher implied totals on the week. So with Jarvis Landry still sidelined and Baker likely needing to throw more than he did against Chicago, Beckham could be in for a monster game. Myles Gaskin has not been great this season, but there are reasons to be encouraged, and those reasons are why we should be starting him against the Colts. Sunday's home matchup against the Colts is the first time the Dolphins have been favored all season, albeit only by 1.5 points, but with Tua Tagovailoa on the IR and Jakobi Brissett at the helm, Brian Flores will be smart to utilize Gaskin early and often. Week 2 was a wash for Gaskin, with the Bills blowing Miami's doors off, and Week 1 was a below-average matchup in Foxborough. But Gaskin still has been targeted 5+ times in all 3 weeks and has out-touched Malcolm Brown on the ground 13-7 on Sunday. He's actually been efficient as a rusher too, averaging 5.1 yards per carry on the season. So it feels like a decent week to start him, where we should see a neutral to favorable game script at home. The Colts have allowed only 1 rushing touchdown so far, but that's going to change. They're coughing up 4.5 yards per attempt, with the 5th most yards and carries allowed this season. They aren't a terrible defense either, but they've trailed in every game they've played thanks to a porous offense, and should make it easy for Gaskin to stay involved throughout. I don't love that Brown's getting goal line carries, but Gaskin has still out-touched him 43-17 on the year, and he's been the far more efficient back. I still like this as a spot for Gaskin to come up big in week 4. I'll be starting. It's been a disastrous start to the season for Allen Robinson, make no mistake about it, which is so disappointing given how he's managed to post top 10 numbers at his position in back-to-back seasons despite some terrible quarterback play. But the Bears' offensive line hasn't been able to hold up. Justin Fields has been disastrous after being thrown to the Wolves, and Matt Nagy has done nothing to make matters more palatable for those of us who rely on production from Chicago's top offensive players. But Robinson hasn't helped either, having already dropped 2 passes on the season, one would have been a touchdown, after dropping only 1 ball all season on 150 targets in 2020. So while I know this isn't going to feel very good, you have to stick with Robinson for one more week. Hear me out. He draws a matchup against the Lions, who are allowing a league-worst 10.3 yards per attempt and a 123.2 passer rating to opposing quarterbacks. Detroit has already coughed up 7 touchdowns through the air, but these numbers would look a lot worse if Marquise Brown didn't forget how to play football last week. Seriously, he was one of my must-starts from Week 3's video, and I don't regret it. The guy literally dropped 3 would-be touchdowns. I'm not exaggerating either. Go back and watch the film. Brown should have had an absolute monster of a game. And while Lamar Jackson is way better than whoever Nagy decides to start on Sunday, I'm telling you right now, this Lions secondary is so bad that Robinson could finally eat. My only concern is Detroit's pass rush isn't that bad, and Bears quarterbacks have been sacked a league-high 15 times. But this is absolutely a risk I'm willing to take for a guy we drafted in the 3rd round. George Kittle has gotten off to a slow start this season, and I think it's made it easy for people to forget how absolutely dominant this guy is with the ball in his hands. Kittle is 2nd in the league behind only Rondale Moore in yards after catch per reception among all players with at least 15 targets, and has insane upside every week. He saw a season-high 9 targets in Sunday's loss to Green Bay, and Shanahan would be smart to keep him busy in Week 4's divisional showdown against the Seahawks, who just got gutted by Tyler Conklin for 70 yards and a touchdown on 7 receptions. PFF grades Seattle's pass coverage at 24th, while Football Outsiders has them even further down at 27. The 49ers have a robust 27.5-point total in a game that boasts the 3rd highest total on the week at 52.5 points, and San Francisco's backfield is so banged up / ineffective that Garoppolo could be forced to throw a lot for the 2nd straight week. But ultimately, I'm not down on Kittle quite yet, and you shouldn't be either. He's still playing 100% of snaps each week and ranks 2nd in yards per route run in the league behind only Travis Kelce at the tight end position. Maybe I'm naive, or maybe I'm just dumb and ignorant of the situation, but it feels like Shanahan would be wise to use Kittle more consistently when he's one of the most talented pass catchers in football. The touchdowns and red zone targets should come, and so should the fantasy production. You drafted this guy in the 3rd round because he's a beast, and you have to start him this week in a plus home matchup against Seattle. Clyde Edwards-Helaire broke out for his first big game of the season in Sunday's loss to the Chargers, topping the 100-yard mark on 17 carries while catching 2 passes and a touchdown, which came inside the 10-yard line. He now has 2 targets and 2 carries inside the 10 for the season, which is encouraging, even though Darrell Williams has the lone goal line carry. And while Edwards-Helaire has fumbled in back-to-back games, Andy Reid hasn't gone away from him, seeing that he received 11 carries after the fumble and was trusted in the red zone. The one thing that always scares me with Edwards-Helaire is Kansas City's offense is generally so efficient that many of their scores come from outside the red zone and nowhere near the goal line. Still, he's on an elite offense with an MVP quarterback who effortlessly creates yards. So ultimately, Edwards-Helaire will reap some of the rewards. He could definitely see a big workload and hopefully an equally sizable fantasy score on Sunday when the Chiefs head to Philly to face an Eagles team that just got annihilated by the Cowboys in primetime, surrendering a combined 155 rushing yards and 5.5 yards per attempt to Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. Kansas City has a sky-high 31-point implied total and are 7.5-point favorites on the road, which sets Edwards-Helaire up beautifully to enjoy both volume and efficiency on Sunday. And I'm not a narrative guy, you guys know that. But Andy Reid coached in Philadelphia for 14 years and is still loved by the fan base. So if the Chiefs are bludgeoning the Eagles in front of their home crowd, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a very run-heavy approach and just looks to run the clock out late in the game. I got to tell you about the most ridiculous promo we have going on and will probably ever run. Partnering with Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports to give you guys 2 free months, completely free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That includes all of the tools that we have to offer on the site, not just for football, but for every single sport. And all of these tools, of course, created by the #1 DFS player out there, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, who's won legitimately millions of dollars using these very tools. So go over, sign up at Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports using the link in the description, deposit $10 or more, and get $180 worth of Awesemo Plus Platinum. We'll never run anything like this again. At least I hope we don't. So take advantage of it now, and we'll catch you over there. Antonio Gibson's first couple weeks had people who drafted him in the second round a little worried, but he bailed them out with a beautiful 73-yard touchdown reception in Week 3's ass-kicking at the hands of the Bills. That's not really going to cut it over the course of the season, though, given that Gibson was only targeted twice on the day. Still, he's a dynamic receiver who should absolutely be used in the passing game more, but will also get a lot more work on the ground so long as Washington's defense isn't a sieve every week. This week presents a perfect opportunity for Gibson to reestablish himself as the high-volume back we were hoping for this season, and the one we saw in Week 1 who had 20 carries and 25 total looks. And it's worth noting that Gibson leads J.D. McKissic in targets with 9 to 8 and has only run 5 fewer routes. The Week 4 matchup with Atlanta is fantastic, not because the Falcons' run defense has been disastrous, they've been middle of the road, but because Matt Ryan seems to be dust at this point, and they simply can't score points. Similar to what we talked about with Kittle, Ron Rivera will need to lean on one of his best skill players if they want to be successful, especially when Taylor Heineke is under center. This is as good a time as ever to make that happen, with Washington sitting as a slight favorite and a nice 25-point implied total at home. You gotta ride with Gibson this week, even if his lightened workload over the last 2 weeks has been concerning. And think of it this way, the dude still has 82% of all running back carries in his backfield, so we know it belongs only to him. I told you guys at the beginning, I tell you every week, I'll tell you one more time. I'm not here to give you players that are playing great, that are elite, and that everyone knows to start. It'll waste your time and mine, okay? It's the players who you drafted as flex players or later, or the guys you drafted early who are underperforming and starting to spike your anxiety that I want to talk about. It's not only more interesting, but a lot more helpful, I'd hope. That's why we need to give Jonathan Taylor another shot this week. It's true that Taylor's explosion in the final quarter of his rookie season came against bad teams and worse defenses. But Taylor has been involved in mostly all negative game scripts to start the year, and the Colts ranked 21st in run play percentage, where last season they were 9th. He's still handling 67% of running back rushing attempts, though, and leads the entire league in goal line carries with 6, which is both encouraging and disappointing because despite the opportunity, Taylor has yet to punch one into the end zone. You still have to expect some positive regression here, though, even if Quentin Nelson is sidelined. Taylor converted 8 of his 16 goal line carries into touchdowns last year, and Football Outsiders still ranks Indianapolis 7th in adjusted line yards and 4th in stuff percentage this season, which is good. I don't love Nyheim Hines' increased usage at all, and Taylor's 11 touches last week were definitely concerning. But in what should be a neutral game script against a far from explosive Miami offense, this could be our last chance to get a taste of last year's production out of Taylor, and we have to roll the dice. Before we get to our number one player, and I think you're going to like this, going off the beaten path a little bit because that's what we do here. I want to hit on 3 guys that you should probably have on your bench and not in your starting lineup this week, starting with Damien Harris. Very simple. Tampa Bay's run defense is spectacular. They have stymied or stifled every single running back they've faced this season and pretty much everyone they faced last year. Expect Mac Jones to turn to the aerial attack and for Damien Harris to have a rough day. Meanwhile, Miles Sanders, I could lose my mind at the usage for this guy. He's the most explosive and the most dynamic player in this offense, yet Nick Sirianni, seemingly the reincarnation of Doug Peterson, but worse, decides to give him 2 carries and 2 receptions in the entire game. I mean, what? How does that make any sense at all? The answer, it doesn't make any sense at all. Miles Sanders should be a starter every single week, but we can't right now, even against the Kansas City run defense that's been absolutely torched. The only hope here is that the Eagles keep it close enough, even with this battered offensive line, and Nick Sirianni learns from his mistakes for at least a week, but I don't see it happening. I got to take the wait and see approach here until they turn things around, if they do. And lastly, Robby Anderson. Sure, he may have had a rapport with Sam Darnold back there in New York, but it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. DJ Moore is the clear number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 option in Carolina. And now that Christian McCaffrey's out, it just makes this offense even more one-dimensional. I'm out on Robby Anderson until we see some progress. And now for the number 1 must start for week 4. It's what you've all been waiting for, and I bet you didn't think it would be Jakobi Meyers. That's right. Jakobi Meyers is a perfect example of efficiency not catching up with volume yet. He's seen the 13th most targets and receptions at his position this season, but hasn't found the end zone and is averaging only 9.6 yards per reception. That said, Meyers has been targeted 6 times on the deep ball this year, which places him inside the top 10 for targets of 20-plus yards downfield. The opportunities are there for Meyers, who has a near 25% target share and more than 33% of the Patriots' air yards. That is objectively good. And now he'll face a Bucs team in Foxborough that can score points in bunches. With Tom Brady returning to New England for the first time and the Patriots having an improved defense from last season, I could definitely see this primetime game being competitive, even with the Bucs being 7-point road favorites. But regardless, Tampa Bay is going to score points, and Damien Harris is going to have a miserable time trying to run against their stifling run defense, which is holding opposing rushing attacks to 3.1 yards per carry and 63.7 yards per game. Not good. This is naturally going to funnel a lot of the Patriots offense through the passing game, and Meyers is going to be very busy. And the Bucs have actually been torched in the passing game this year, allowing a league-high 338 yards per game and 9 touchdowns. I really like Meyers' chances for Week 4, especially given how involved he's been to start the year. Thanks for watching. As always, be sure to head over to Awesemo.com. Check out everything we've got for DFS, season-long, sports betting, you name it. I'm Dave Loughran. We'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.